Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be looking at Kevin Curtis,
Oh, yeah.
the Elvis impersonator at the center of the Netflix docuseries, The Kings of Tupelo.
Okay.
You sent us a pretty fascinating article about this.
Yeah.
Buckle up, because this deep dive is going to be a wild ride through music, conspiracy theories,
Right.
and a presidential assassination attempt,
Wow.
all tied together.
This is a prime example of how truth can be stranger than fiction.
Yeah.
So we're going to be exploring Kevin's background, how his fascination with conspiracies developed,
Right.
and how it all culminated in him being wrongly accused of a very serious crime.
The article starts by talking about Kevin's, double life.
Sure.
Janitor by day, but by night he transforms into Elvis.
Yeah.
What kind of impact could embodying, the king himself
Oh, yeah.
have had on his personality and worldview?
It's a really interesting dynamic, right? Like, impersonating someone as iconic as Elvis could have easily fed into, a desire for the spotlight and maybe even influenced his tendency to create these really dramatic narratives.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, did the need to always be on stage bleed into his everyday life?
And it sounds like Kevin was a pretty popular Elvis impersonator.
Yeah.
The article mentions that he even formed a group with his brother called Double Trouble.
That's right. And it seems that success might have fueled a growing sense of self-importance. When his brother Jack also decided to become an Elvis impersonator, Kevin wasn't too happy about it.
Oh, really?
It seems like there might have been some jealousy there, or maybe a need to always be the center of attention.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the article talks about this incident at the hospital where he worked as a janitor,
Right.
cleaning the morgue, and he came across human organs stored in a refrigerator.
Right.
Normal sight in a hospital setting, right?
Yeah.
But this seemingly ordinary event sent him spiraling down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole.
It's fascinating here is how easily we can connect unrelated dots, especially when we're dealing with pre-existing beliefs or anxieties. And for Kevin, those organs became evidence of a vast organ trafficking ring.
It sounds like he went as far as to create fake online profiles to expose this supposed ring.
Yeah.
Spending hours on the dark web, the whole thing sounds like it's straight out of a spy thriller.
Right. And it's worth noting that an organ trafficking ring was eventually busted in a nearby area,
Far.
completely separate from the hospital where Kevin worked.
Oh, okay.
But for him, this only solidified his theory. This is like a textbook case of confirmation bias.
Yeah.
We tend to gravitate toward information that validates our existing beliefs, even if it's totally unrelated to what we already think.
And it wasn't just the hospital. It seems like anyone who crossed him or disagreed with him ended up woven into his conspiracy theories.
Absolutely. Whether it was his brother Jack, a local politician named Steve Holland, or even Senator Roger Wicker, anyone Kevin had a grievance with was suddenly part of this grand, imagined conspiracy.
Wow.
And often, he'd tie them back to the organ trafficking ring, too.
So it sounds like paranoia and personal grudges were starting to really distort his perception of reality.
Exactly. When we hold on to resentment or feel wronged, it can really warp how we see the world.
Yeah.
We start to see patterns and conspiracies everywhere, especially when fueled by those feelings of resentment.
Right.
It's a good reminder that our emotions can significantly influence how we process information and make judgments.
And then enters James Everett Dutch,
Ooh, yeah.
a figure who complicates this already tangled web even further.
Yes, Dushka enters the picture and begins a relationship with Kevin's wife, Laura.
Oh, wow.
This, of course, further fuels Kevin's paranoia.
Uh-huh.
It's important to note that Darsky will later play a key role in framing Kevin for a serious crime.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Rice-and-laced letters are sent to several people, including President Obama and the prime suspect. You guessed it, Kevin Curtis.
It seems like a case of if the shoe fits.
Right.
Right. The letters were addressed to Sadie Holland, the mother of Steve Holland, who had a previous run-in with Kevin, and Senator Wicker.
Right.
Both individuals Kevin had publicly expressed animosity towards.
Yeah.
Not only that, but the language used in the letters seemed to mirror Kevin's own writing style.
But wouldn't someone so deep into conspiracy theories like Kevin
Right.
know better than to leave such an obvious trail?
That's where Dutchke's manipulative nature comes into play.
It's okay.
He had actually studied Kevin's writing and behavior patterns, carefully crafting those letters to deliberately incriminate him.
Wow.
It's a pretty chilling example of how someone can exploit another person's perceived weaknesses and existing narratives for their own personal gain.
So we have Kevin, already immersed in his own world of conspiracies, now
Yeah.
being framed for a crime that perfectly fits that narrative.
Yeah.
He's caught in a web of his own making.
Yeah, but who spun that web?
Right.
Dutchke.
Dutchke, yeah. And this raises a really interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
If Kevin hadn't already been labeled as a conspiracy theorist,
Yeah.
would he have even been considered a suspect?
That's a great question.
Or would investigators have seen the framing for what it was from the start?
It really makes you think about how quickly we can jump to conclusions based on pre-existing perceptions.
Yeah.
We'll dive deeper into how Kevin gets out of this mess in the next part of our deep dive.
Right.
This case is a story that really highlights the importance of critical thinking, thorough investigation, and the danger of making assumptions based solely on appearances.
I can't wait to see how this unfolds. This deep dive has been full of twists and turns already.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling the best is yet to come. So we left off with Kevin, seemingly caught in this web of conspiracies and accusations framed by James Everett Dutchke for sending those ricin-laced letters. The evidence appeared stacked against him. How did he manage to get out of this, airtight situation?
It's fascinating how a seemingly insignificant detail ended up unraveling Dutchke's carefully constructed plan.
Okay.
During Kevin's interrogation, investigators asked him about ricin, the deadly poison used in the letters.
Right.
And his response was pure confusion. He thought they were asking about rice.
So he had no idea what ricin was.
Yeah, it's a pretty big red flag considering he was accused of sending letters containing the substance.
Rice?
That moment of genuine bewilderment from Kevin made investigators pause and reassess.
Yeah.
Here was this man accused of a very serious crime involving this deadly poison, yet he didn't even know what it was.
Right.
It just didn't add up.
That sounds like a pretty big turning point in the case.
Yeah.
Did that then prompt them to take a closer look at Dutchke?
Absolutely. Kevin's confusion about the ricin led investigators to dig deeper into Dutchke's background.
Okay.
And what they uncovered was quite revealing, a history of framing individuals. He had even tried to frame someone for child pornography in the past.
So this wasn't his first attempt at, manipulating the system and using it to target someone?
Exactly. It seems Dutchke had a pattern of exploiting people's vulnerabilities and using their own tendencies against them.
So the investigators began to piece together this, new narrative.
Right.
Dutchke, with his history of framing people, targets Kevin, the conspiracy theorist, with a known grudge against some of these letter recipients.
It's a classic case of understanding human psychology and using it to your advantage.
Right.
Dutch knew that Kevin's reputation as a conspiracy theorist would make him an easy target.
Yeah.
Someone the authorities would naturally zero in on.
It's scary to think that someone could exploit our own, personality traits and behaviors against us.
Uh-huh.
Especially someone like Dutchke knows how to manipulate the system.
Yeah.
Does this make you rethink how you evaluate information, particularly online?
It's definitely a wake-up call about the importance of critical thinking and being aware of how easily we can fall prey to manipulation. Right.
We need to be wary of confirmation bias, not only in our own thinking, but also in how others might use it against us.
Okay, so the investigators are not suspicious of Dutch.
Right, yeah.
What kind of evidence did they find to, directly link him to the ricin letters?
Remember how the letters were carefully crafted to mimic Kevin's writing style? Well, it turns out that Dutch had access to discarded drafts of Kevin's writing.
Oh, wow.
And he used these drafts to meticulously study Kevin's phrasing, vocabulary, and overall style, which allowed him to create these really convincing forgeries.
So in a way, Dutch was playing this, twisted game of literary impersonation.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
He used his intelligence and understanding of language to manipulate the situation to his advantage.
Right.
He knew how to create this believable narrative, and he exploited the situation perfectly.
It's fascinating and kind of terrifying to see how he combined his knowledge of human behavior with his writing skills to pull off this elaborate frame-up. This case really highlights the power of language, how it can be used to both reveal and conceal the truth. And in this case, Dutch used it as a weapon.
What happened to Kevin after the focus of the investigation shifted to Dutch?
Thankfully, all charges against Kevin were dropped.
Wow.
Imagine going from being the prime suspect in a presidential assassination attempt to being completely exonerated.
Right.
It must have been an incredible emotional roller coaster for him.
Yeah, the article says that he's still living in Mississippi.
Okay.
Has vowed to stay away from conspiracy theories.
Good for him.
choosing to focus on his family instead.
Yeah, it's understandable that he'd want to distance himself from that world after such a traumatic experience.
Right.
But it makes you wonder, did this ordeal change his perspective on conspiracies at all?
Right.
Or does he still hold on to some of those beliefs even if he's trying to suppress them?
That's a great question. Do you think someone who was so deeply entrenched in conspiracy theories can ever truly escape that mindset?
It's a really complex question without an easy answer. It's certainly possible to change your thinking patterns, but it requires like a conscious effort and a willingness to challenge those ingrained beliefs.
This entire case is like a roller coaster full of intrigue, manipulation, and a constant push and pull between truth and perception.
It definitely is. It's a story that reminds us to always question our assumptions, to look beyond the surface, and to remember that things are not always as they appear.
Right.
We need to be critical consumers of information and be aware of how easily our own biases can lead us astray.
So was Kevin Curtis a victim of circumstance manipulated by this like cunning individual who took advantage of his tendency to see conspiracies?
Yeah.
Or did he play a role in his own downfall by allowing himself to be consumed by these beliefs?
Right.
That's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
So we've been on this journey with Kevin Curtis's story. He was caught in this web of conspiracy theories, framed for this really serious crime, ultimately exonerated.
But was Kevin actually delusional? Was he seeing these connections that just weren't there? Or did he stumble onto something real but lack the concrete evidence to prove it?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question, right? The Kings of Tupelo lays out this compelling narrative, but ultimately there's no hard proof to back up Kevin's claims about this like organ trafficking ring or the motives of the people that he suspected.
The article even mentions that Kevin's own brother and Steve Holland, the politician he accused, believed that Kevin was just like connecting these dots that didn't actually exist.
It's important to remember that our brains are kind of wired to find these patterns, even when those patterns are just illusions.
Right.
You know, we're constantly trying to make sense of the world around us, and sometimes that leads us to create connections where there are none.
Do you think that Kevin's Elvis persona, with its tendency towards drama and theatrics, played a role in his like inclination to see conspiracies everywhere?
It's certainly a possibility. The article really highlights how much Kevin seemed to enjoy the attention that his Elvis act brought him. Yeah.
Perhaps that need for the spotlight kind of spilled over into other areas of his life,
Right.
fueling his desire to uncover and expose these grand conspiracies.
So maybe the line between like performing and believing got a little blurred for him.
Yeah, that's a great point. When we immerse ourselves in a particular role or identity, it can have these like unexpected effects on our thoughts and behaviors.
This deep dive into the Kings of Tupelo has been a fascinating case study into the power of belief and the dangers of letting speculation run wild.
Absolutely.
It really makes you think about the importance of separating fact from fiction,
Right.
especially in today's world where misinformation spreads like wildfire online.
It's a crucial reminder to be like critical consumers of information.
Yeah.
And to always seek evidence before jumping to conclusions.
Right.
We live in this age where anyone can share anything online regardless of its validity.
It's true.
Developing strong critical thinking skills and learning to identify our own biases is more important than ever. So what do you think? Was Kevin Curtis a victim of circumstance? Or did he in some way create his own downfall? This deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about.
It really has.
Let us know your thoughts.